It was the dawn of the third age of podcasting, 30 years after the series had launched.
The Babylon Podcast was a dream given form. Its goal, to discuss the place where humans and aliens could work out their differences peacefully.
It's a port of call, home away from home for established fans, newbies, John, Blaine, and guests.
Humans and aliens wrapped in 2,500,000 tons of spinning metal, all alone in the night.
It can be a dangerous place.
Wait, what?
But it's our last, best hope for peace.
This is the story of the last of the Babylon stations.
The year is 2024.
The name of the podcast is
Babylon 5, 30 years later. Welcome to the latest episode of Babylon 5, 30 years later, the podcast where we go through every episode and tie in media for Babylon 5, looking at it 30 years after the original publication date. By we, there's your two regular co-hosts, myself, Blaine Dowler, and John Wilson, who's with us for his first time through Babylon 5. How you doing, John?
I am doing pretty well, Blaine. I was thinking, I've decided that there probably is some redeeming factor somewhere in your genetic code. Just please don't make a liar of me in 10 minutes.
Oh, okay. And for those who didn't recognize that very distinctive chuckle, we are joined by a special guest today, Mr. John Suntress. So,
John, welcome.
Good to see you guys. Thank you very much for having me. Excited to be here.
Oh, very happy. Those who found us from following mine and John's previous podcasts, which are pretty comic-centric, probably do not need to be introduced to John Suntress. For those who found us through the Babylon 5 link, John has been the host of Word Balloon for, at the time of this recording, 18 years. At the time you will hear this recording, about 3 months short of the 20-year mark.
Here's hoping. Absolutely, man. That's my intent. And thank you for acknowledging that. Yeah, pretty long-time Babylon 5 fan. I have to admit, I came to it when it went to TNT. Initially, I think, and this is okay to talk about because there's been enough episodes and stuff. I really, the look of the Centauri, and they really played up Londo in a lot of the promotional stuff. And I was not ready for that broom wig look.
It's a little off-putting if you're completely external to the show, just looking at it. I remember having similar reactions to the trailers and stuff that would play on TV in the 90s.
Yeah, but I when TNT got the rights and they had a whole big like hour or 2 hour behind the scenes thing, and they showed great clips of everything. And that's, I'm like, oh, look at this. I'm like, well, maybe I have to give this a second shot. So I did, and I'm glad I did, because it's truly one of the great science fiction series of all time. It is deserving of that ranking with Twilight Zone and Star Trek in terms of significance, I think, and probably Outer Limits, although certainly a longer run than the original Outer Limits. So yeah, I'm a massive fan, and I'm very happy that the franchise is getting, at least as of this recording, more looks, and hopefully we'll get more Babylon 5 eventually.
Hopefully, yes. This is being recorded a few days after they announced Babylon 5 The Road Home, the animated series, which John without an H and I will be covering at the end of this coverage. For the long gaps, we won't be holding to that 30 years later thing. We'll just go from episode to episode.
So just so I can be sure, TNT picking up Babylon 5, is that moving into the last season, or when is that in the series run?
Yeah, that is the home as of season 5, which we'll cover in much more detail as we get there, because there's a lot of dominoes that brought them to that point.
And they also made those movies as well in between, I think, season 4 and 5.
Right. I like dominoes. They have those Parmesan bread bites.
Yeah, those were TNT produced movies.
Okay.
Yes, the first was in the beginning, and then there's a couple others that came out during the course of season 5.
Yes, Third Space I know was one that the title comes to mind. There was the one with Martin Sheen, pre West Wing Martin Sheen, as one of the first ones, as I recall.
Yeah, so as we said, we will get to that in about 3 years.
I mean, we'll get to it more quickly than that because we go through these weekly. But yeah, as far as broadcast order, or broadcast dates.
Speaking of which, this was originally broadcast on February 1st, 1995. It was the 9th episode produced in Season 2 and was the 9th to air. So Season 2 was much more linear than season 1 was.
Wow.
And I was thinking about everything because we talked about, episode order versus broadcast order with the previous 2 episodes. But with what happens here, I cannot imagine anything that aired before this coming after.
Yeah. This is one of those points where there's clear demarcations.
This is a very significant moment in the series as a whole, and new directions are introduced and consequences coming from the actions in this episode. No, it's a very pivotal episode.
Yes, written by J. Michael Straczynski, as is going to be the case with all but 4 of the episodes we have left to discuss, and directed by Janet Greek, who's a name we've heard several times before.
Big director for the big episodes of the show.
Yep. Now, quickly running through the guest cast before we have our summary. Frederick Lane, or Lenny, was our ranger. You might actually know him from Ordinary People, which won Best Picture for 1980. Men in Black, Dark Knight Rises. So he's got 157 credits to his name.
He is a face you have seen, and you have seen a lot. And he's just that guy.
Yeah, his latest credit on the IMDb actually has not aired as of the time of this recording. It's an episode for TV. It's a season finale coming up soon. Then we have Malachi Throne.
Malachi Throne.
Malachi Throne, yes. He plays the Centauri Prime Minister, whose character was posthumously named after the actor.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And a great, if you guys don't know, a great character actor. One of the real stalwarts of character acting for television and film was Falseface on the Batman 66 series. Was Commodore Mendez on the Cage and the Menagerie, or rather the Menagerie, the only 2-part original Star Trek episodes. And and of course was the spy master to Robert Wagner in The Great Show It Takes a Thief among his credits.
Yep, as Noah Bain. He's also in Catch Me If You Can and the original Mission Impossible.
He's also he plays 2 roles in the Menagerie.
Well, he's Commodore Mendez and the
Keeper.
He was the original voice, the original
right.
deep voice of the Keeper in the unbroadcast version of The Cage.
That is absolutely right.
Whenever they had the women playing the physical and the male voices dubbed over.
Right, and they did kind of a harmonizing thing to make him sound more alien and slightly higher pitch, but not a woman's voice by any means. But it was interesting that the Telosians were all played by tiny women, but Malachi Throne was the voice. That's right, of the Keeper.
Yeah, he was also the voice of God in 2 episodes of the Animaniacs, and he was the voice of Ranakar in Green Lantern First Flight.
Pretty amazing career, man. Truly, I mean, this guy, I believe, was active from the 50s through the 90s. It's and if not, at least the 60s. But I do believe he started in the 50s. A great career, amazing character actor.
Yeah, and that last credit for First Flight is 2009.
Oh, there you go. Jeez.
Yeah, he passed in 2013. So.
Wow, I didn't realize, because I've heard others who had worked with him in the 90s and who had, like Rob Burnett, who made Free Enterprise, was trying to get him in Free Enterprise and stuff, and they had a meeting, but he ended up passing. So.
Yeah, his first credit was from Search for Tomorrow in 1951. So he'd have been 23. The next one.
Great actor. Go ahead.
Yeah. It's next actor worth mentioning is William Ford. We talked about him before because this is his second appearance as Lord Rifa.
Mm-hmm.
Keep your eyes on Rifa, everybody.
Yeah, he seems a lot more notable in this than he did last time.
Yeah, and I mean, you could tell from this episode the political intrigue and machinations that are, already in motion and stuff. But yeah, Riva's one to watch.
Yes. Our next actor here is Turhan Bey. And Babylon 5 is actually his last credit. So the Centauri Emperor,
yes.
That character was named Emperor Turhan after the actor. He will play a different character in season 5.
He has an interesting
Learning Curve.
Who will? Say it again?
He'll play Turval in Learning Curve.
Oh, go on. I'm sorry, John.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, because he has an interesting look. He comes off looking like he's of East Asian descent, but he's actually this interesting mix of West Asian. He's Turkish and Jewish and Czech.
Yes.
And born in Austria.
Great sword and sandal character actor, again, in the golden age of Hollywood, 40s and 50s. And Yeah, it's cool. It's very Tarantino-esque that the Babylon 5 producers got Turhan Bey, because he really is, I think, so great in this role, and it's one of his best roles, I think, in his career.
Yeah, and he was very well liked among the cast and crew, who came yelling to Straczynski, "You find this wonderful man and then you kill him off? Bring him back. We don't care how, but find a way to bring him back."
No kidding, man. No, such charisma, and we'll get into it as we talk about the story.
Yeah, apparently he had some incredible stories because he was romantically linked with almost every leading lady of the 1940s. So the lunch breaks had some very interesting anecdotes. But yeah, you look him up on the IMDb. He's 5 or 6 credits a year through the 40s, and there's a jump from 53 to 93.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, and then he's working fairly regularly again, so who knows, maybe he was on the stage for those years. IMDb doesn't track that well.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good point.
He did appear in an episode of Murder, She Wrote, but that was after JMS had left that series. That was season 11. So he also
went into
have
the Army after his 40s career in acting. He served in the military. I'm not sure what else he did between those 40s and 50s, but I know part of it was military service.
Okay. This is our third appearance of Neil Bradley. Here he is Kamak, but we're going to see a lot of him. Yeah, he's got a lot. He'll appear in 9 episodes of Babylon 5 and 1 of Crusade, but based on the names here, there's maybe 2 that are human at most. A variety of aliens. He doesn't seem to play the same character. Most of his credits are in the electrical department. He's only got 4 acting credits, and the first 2 are Babylon 5.
Interesting.
So it could be one of those guys who's not a super impressive actor, but works well under the makeup. So he's good for that 1 or 2 lines a show kind of thing.
Now, I don't recognize this character. I don't remember seeing him on the show. Who is this Michael O'Hare person? What did he play?
Yes.
He's being silly. John's being silly.
Yep.
Yeah, it's great to have Sinclair back.
That was a big surprise. I did not expect to see his face again.
Yeah, and I'm sure you guys covered his backstory, why he left the show in previous episodes and stuff. And it's great that Straczynski found a way to reintroduce Sinclair and keep him because he is important to the big story, leaving it at that.
Yeah, and this isn't just a surprise to the viewers. We'll do the plot synopsis in a moment, but he only appears on screen. This was a surprise to pretty much everybody in the cast, because they knew that they needed him to have this message. So during season, or just after season 1, in the break between seasons, he was living in New York, where Babylon 5 was filmed outside LA. O'Hare was in New York at the same time as B5 producers, so they just quietly met together at a studio, recorded it, and just tucked away the tape and told nobody that it happened, and it dropped in. So he recorded this months and months in advance.
Wow.
Hello, old friend.
Yeah. So there were the 2 messages. So
I always wondered if it was 2 different messages, given the way that it starts. I'm sure from a production standpoint, they just did the 1 session. But the fact that it does, because the information does Sinclair ever refer to Garibaldi as Michael when he's talking to him? I don't think so.
He doesn't. There is a specific question where JMS was asked that, and he answers it. So in Asked and Answered Part 5, page 1627 of this series, why did Sinclair never mention Garibaldi's last name in the message? On the chance that the data crystal might fall into the wrong hands, I had Sinclair deliberately avoid using Garibaldi's last name and avoid using Delenne's altogether, since she only has the 1. The Ranger was told to deliver the crystals at the cost of his own life if necessary, but sometimes such orders don't end well for the messenger, so the messages began the same way. Question: did Sinclair's message to Garibaldi differ from the one he sent to Delenne? Answer: Sinclair didn't send the same letter, same greeting to keep the recipient secret. Only the Ranger knew who got what.
I see. There you
go. They could use the audio recording of "Hello, old friend" from the 1 video to set up the other one, but we can infer that they did actually get different messages.
Yeah, which also means down the road they can know different things about what's going on. And both learned it from Sinclair.
Yep. Do you want to give a summary before we go further?
That's what I was thinking, yeah. So basic summary. This starts off really with the Emperor of the Centauri planning a trip to Babylon 5. And G'Kar is not okay with this. And he deliberately goes to Sheridan, asking him to forbid it because of the atrocities that this man's family has done. Sheridan makes a point of pulling out that, yeah, it was his family, but it wasn't him. And G'Kar doesn't see anything important in that distinction. So as they are preparing for the Centauri Emperor's arrival, Lord Rifa is talking to Londo, and they realize this Emperor, he's not going to be with us long. His health is failing. So we need to position ourselves to make sure that the future of the Centauri is what we want it to be. G'Kar is preparing to give up everything in his personal life to assassinate him, to the point of recording a last will and testament that absolves everybody else of any guilt, saying this is me and me alone, while the rest on the station are just trying to prepare. And in the height of all the security, someone boards the station, sees Garibaldi, says no, he's found what he's looking for. Garibaldi realizes he's being followed by this man and sets him up with security there, so they capture him and he doesn't speak in front of others. Before the Centauri Emperor can come to the big ceremony, his own health gets to him and he collapses, which deprives G'Kar the pleasure of killing him. So while Franklin is working on him, Garibaldi talks to this man and finds out he is a ranger with a message from Sinclair. So we've talked a few times about characters in the background that are worth noting, that have robes and distinctive badges on. These are they. So we've seen the unfocused rangers 4 or 5 times. So before he dying and succumbing, it's very important to the Emperor that a message gets to G'Kar, and he asks Dr. Franklin to deliver it because he cannot trust any Centauri to do so. And the message is, we're sorry, we're wrong. The Centauri Emperor has finally realized he can actually do what he wants to do, and he can make choices, and he has realized everything the Centauri have done with the Narn was a mistake. And he came here to stand with G'Kar and publicly admit that and apologize to this ambassador, which makes G'Kar's day. Unfortunately, while this is happening, Rifa and Londo are making their own plans, and Londo remembers Morden saying, if you need us, just pick a target and let us know. And he's taken them up on this offer, and the target he's picked is a Narn colony in Quadrant 14, which the Centauri suspect of being a listing post, and frankly, if I were a Narn, it would be. That's just the history between the races. So the Shadows come and wipe it out, with Londo asking Morden to do that over Veer's protests.
Like they're Pearl Harbor essentially,
Yes.
Sneak attack.
Really, yeah.
Completely unprepared, and the Shadows just come and destroy the listing post and that colony on the planet. Well, at least destroy the equipment and everything else. There are survivors, but as Londo says later, they will be cared for and given a new purpose. And Delenn says that's likely going to be slave labor of some sort.
Yeah. Oh, just a modest retraining. Of course, before G'Kar finds out about the attack, he finds out about the Emperor's message and buys Londo a drink. I love the way he tweaks Londo there. He's like, Londo, I am going to get you a drink.
Yeah.
But he just has this pause. So the audience isn't sure that he knows about the quadrant yet. Londo assumes he does.
Well, that's his initial fear when G'Kar is coming to approach him and everything.
He sees G'Kar and runs off the other direction and runs into a crowd of people and can't get away.
Well, yeah, it was essentially Midnight on the Firing Line over again for these guys.
Yep.
Right. So right back to that first episode, and the fact that Londo was having that dream, he also mentioned in Midnight on the Firing Line, where he's going to die.
We finally see the visions that Londo had been talking about. We see him as Emperor. We see him in a death grip battle with G'Kar. We also see him standing and looking to the sky and seeing the shadows, right? Isn't that part of it as well?
Yeah, it's a shadow ship flying over them, although Londo doesn't know that at this point.
Right.
Because he's never actually seen one of their vessels.
Okay, so he's seeing things in his dreams that he doesn't actually know from reality. Interesting.
And the metaphorical hand coming from the cosmos, almost like Apollo in that Star Trek episode, but even more menacing towards whatever. And again, this is just another part of Londo's dream of visions.
Mm-hmm. So with all this going forward, when G'Kar does find out about the attack, he is ready to kill Londo because he knows that Londo knew at the time. Sheridan intervenes and says, yeah, you have every right to be this pissed, but acting on these emotions right now is worse for your people. So, stand down, take a breath, stay out of prison, and be there to help. And Sheridan does actually make some moves to help. So they bring Londo into council, and he's saying, okay, you've got these survivors. we are going to send observers. And unless you want to start a war with Earth Force 2, you're going to allow those observers to observe. And they will see exactly how you are treating these people and exactly how you overtook this colony so quickly. At which point, Londo offers to have the civilians freed and sent back to Narn. Sheridan has a beautiful line where he says, I'm sure everyone will see this gesture for exactly what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then going forward, we eventually learn that, yes, Delenn is the other person on the station who knows about the Rangers. The Narn and Centauri are officially at war. And the Centauri Emperor did get a chance to see a Vorlon, which he's always wanted to do before he dies. He asks the question, how does all this end? And Kosh replies, in fire. His only 2 words in the episode. So
And he hasn't said a lot this season. We have hardly seen him this year.
He never says a lot. That's the great thing about Kosh. Kosh is all-knowing and never speaking more than he needs to, and doesn't usually answer your questions when he speaks. And that's the beauty of Kosh. Absolutely.
Did I miss anything major in the plot summary?
Well, I felt from a character standpoint, it was very pivotal that right before the Emperor dies, Rifa and Mollari are at his bedside, and Rifa tries to comfort him, but we all know Rifa's real motivations and everything. And the Emperor does too, and he basically just kind of waves him off, and he waves Mollari to go closer. And when Londo's at his ear, he whispers and then dies. And this is in front of Dr. Franklin. And Rifa asks, "Oh, what did he say?" And he said, "Continue in my with my blessing, essentially. Continue the war effort," and gives the right political answer to Rifa and the people that are there, Dr. Franklin and maybe his staff. Then Rifa and Londo leave, and Rifa's like, "What did he really say?" And Londo, kind of scared, you hear the catch in his voice, and he said, "We're both going to be damned for doing what we're doing." And this is what I love about this episode in particular, is both the Centauri politics, but also the geopolitics, but I guess we're saying more galactic politics, given what's happening with the Narn, with the Centauri, also the beginning of more information about the Rangers, what they represent, the power they represent, and that at least others in the galaxy are aware that something's going down. And they don't tell us what, but clearly the Rangers are in tune with the disturbances in the Babylon 5 force, if you will.
Yes, which actually, when you were saying that, I remembered another pretty important point to mention is that the Prime Minister who stayed back on Centauri to manage things was also assassinated at the command of Lord Rifa, who deliberately excluded Londo from that planning so that he had more deniability. Just said, better you don't know.
Because
there's something else I have to take care of.
Their puppet ruler is the Emperor's nephew, who we will meet in an upcoming episode and get more into his character. But at least Rifa tells Mollari that he is sympathetic to their political ambitions and will do what this group behind Rifa and I guess Londo as well, what they want and what they want for Centauri Prime.
Yep.
And by sympathetic, we're controlling him.
Yep.
And it actually surprises Veer when Londo says he has no desire to become emperor. I personally think that comment was not so much that he doesn't want the power of the emperor and he wants to save the shadows like he says. I think he's trying to avert that future he sees and his death at the hands of G'Kar.
It's interesting because, we have seen Londo rant drunkenly about wanting the Centauri Empire to return to its former glory. And yet when it actually comes to doing the deeds necessary, we see that Londo is hella conflicted. He is not okay with this. Like, he's doing things and he's choosing to do them. But then when it's like metaphorically sees all the blood all around him as a result, he's like, I didn't think it would be like this.
He's that classic romantic and patriot that believes the propaganda and the positive propaganda of Centauri Prime. And again, the glory days. And he wants to go back to the glory days. But yeah, he kind of sees it, I think, honestly, especially in those earlier episodes, as this romantic past of not only, that it was like a fun adventure almost of the Centauris conquering and becoming the huge power that they were. And yeah, now they're in their worst times. And the Emperor it reminds me of the great movie 7 Days in May, from the 60s that Rod Serling wrote, where the president of the United States in that is considered not a very forceful and strong leader. And you know that the Centauri feel that way about Emperor Turhan and everything, that he's the wrong man for this time, and we need a strong man. And again, I think you're right, John. I think that it now that he's really face up to it, he has to face the fact that bloodshed and yeah, there's everyone has compassion for Mollari eventually. He and G'Kar again are such pivotal characters for the whole big story and everything. But you start to see some sympathy, I think, from Mollari with his conflict.
And a character in this position could go either way. He could lean into his compassion and start to back off, or he could choose to deaden himself to the cost and push forward. And I, as a viewer, don't know what's going to happen which way, but like it could be either one easily. It's just right now, it's like he's at this fork, he's at this crossroads, and you see it all over his face throughout this episode.
Yeah, he loves the ends that he has envisioned, but he hates the means to get there, and that's the tug of war that he's fighting inside.
I think
Will the ends justify the means?
I think he respected the Emperor a lot more than Rifa, certainly more than Rifa does, and that I think also contributed to his conflict of feelings and everything.
There's so much in this episode. Minor point. Turhan Bey does not wear a hair broom, and they give an in-story explanation. They bring out the wig for the old wizened Emperor to look, the part. He's like, no. But I'm just thinking that maybe Turhan Bey's like, I don't want to wear that. I don't need to wear that.
Yeah, that actually came from JMS because he realized as they were going through the previous episodes, the Centauri hair was getting out of control.
Oh, okay.
So he needed to have a cultural shift because he was looking at it going, at the rate it was building through season 1 when they decided it was a status symbol coming into season 2, he's like, if I don't do something soon, the Emperor's hair is going to touch the ceiling. We've got to reel this in.
What's that Southern saying? The taller the hair, the closer to God.
Yeah, they already had problems because Kosh's encounter suit didn't fit through the doors. They didn't want hair that wouldn't fit through doors too.
Yeah, and you'll see in subsequent episodes a slight paring down as far as the hair height on the Centauri, but also it works for the character in this moment as well. He's done with all the pomp and circumstance. Mm-hmm. He has real business that he wants to deal with, and that's kind of consistent. Where he's just like, yeah. Listen, I'm the Emperor. I know what I need to do right now. I will take care of it. And that's the tragedy. I mean, he knows that he can't trust his own people, and it's he knows time is short. He knows his health is failing him. In fact, the Prime Minister warns him about taking the trip in general, and he's like, your health can't stand up to this kind of pressure and stress. And he's like, I need to do this. It's truly, this is one of the best episodes, I think, of the series.
It's definitely very strong, and JMS says he likes about 2 or 3 times a season to just flip everything over and have you going, oh crap, everything is different now. And here is the first of those from season 2.
Yep.
Well, we haven't actually mentioned it yet this episode, but this is the episode that gives the season its title and theme, The Coming of Shadows. So this is going into this episode and seeing its title. I knew this was going to be a big one. I had no idea what was going to happen, but I knew this was going to be big.
Yeah. JMS, one of the things that sets Babylon 5 apart is that JMS structured it like a novel. So you've got your introduction, your acting action, your climax, your falling action, your denouement. As far as JMS is concerned, now that we've seen this episode, we're finally done the introduction, and we can start to get to the rising action.
Okay, so this is the one, because you told me about this at the end of season 1, because you said that for you, that feeling of the end of the introduction was the end of the first season. But JMS is like, this is the end of the prologue, and now it's time for actual book.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Do we? And forgive me if I'm stealing your thunder, guys, but I see that it won the Hugo Award for best presentation. And did you see the nominees that it was up against that year?
No, I did not. But we should bring those up because I love Hugos.
This is amazing. All right. And I'll tell you the vote count. So first of all, coming in 5th is the Deep Space Nine episode, The Visitor. So it beat The Visitor, which is pretty amazing. And a lot of people point to The Visitor as one of those great all-time Star Trek episodes of all the different shows, and it's certainly one of my favorites. It makes me cry every time I watch it. Number 4, Toy Story.
Oh, wow.
The first Toy Story movie. Number 3, the movie 12 Monkeys. Number 2, Apollo 13. And
Wow.
The Coming of Shadows beat the Hugo Award votes by well over 102 votes. The Coming of Shadows, number 1. Apollo 13 had 355. 12 Monkeys 160. Toy Story 76. And The Visitor only 60. And then 15 for no award at all. But yeah, what an accomplishment, and in great company of nominees. But yeah, it's shocking. I'm very surprised seeing that list.
For those who don't know The Visitor by name, that's the episode where Tony Todd plays an adult Jake Sisko, and Ben Sisko was snapping through time, following him through his life.
Presumed dead. Yeah, and it's for every father and son story. It's such an amazing story.
Yeah. So John, if you haven't gotten there yet, because John is watching Deep Space Nine along with this.
Oh, I'm sorry, John.
No, I've seen all of Deep Space Nine before, but most of it I've seen only once, and I had to look up what The Visitor was. But I do remember that episode happening.
Yeah, I believe it was very early in season 4, which
That's
means
right.
it would have aired around early season 3 for Babylon 5.
I believe it was the second episode after finishing the two-parter, or rather, that Way of the Warrior. Yeah, which wasn't a two-parter; it was a 2-hour episode. But the introduction of Worf, it was the next episode.
October 95. It is the second aired episode of season 4. Okay, so I just finally got to the Hugo list. Now later they will start splitting their dramatic presentation awards into a long form and short form category. So a TV episode will be a short form episode. It would be up against other TV episodes. I'm sorry, short form category. And films would be long form. But it's worth noting that a huge film like Apollo 13 and 12 Monkeys, which is one of my favorite science fiction films of all time.
Yeah.
And Toy Story, those are all. I mean, Toy Story, it's a good movie. I don't know if I would put it in the science fiction category, although technically it is because it's the living, dolls.
Yeah, sci-fi fantasy, yeah.
But yeah, the fact that this beats out all of those is pretty notable.
Yeah. Keeping in mind Apollo 13 was up for the Oscar for Best Picture.
And
no, these are great movies, and again, the DS9 episode, one of the best Star Trek episodes ever. JMS and Coming of Shadows beats them all.
This is the second time at least that we've mentioned the Hugos on here because Bester is named for Alfred Bester, who wrote The Demolished Man, which is one of the first Hugo Award-winning novels.
Yep,
yeah.
And
I think the first.
Destination. Yep.
The first Hugo Award-winning novel.
Yep, and it will not be the last time we mention the Hugos as we're going through this series. This was their first win. This is not their last win. And there were also, we'll get to it, but there were years they didn't win because they split the vote. So, like, one of the second, third, and fourth place winners were all episodes of Babylon 5, and the winner's acceptance speech was, "I'd like to thank the Babylon 5 fans for not being able to agree on which episode to vote for."
Okay, really random tangential connection that's going to parabola back to the show. The same year that this won, The Diamond Age by Neil Stephenson won Best Novel. Neil Stephenson has written a lot of books, and one of his other books, Snow Crash, previous guest on the show, Van Allen Plexico, has just recently finished Snow Crash after having a hard time getting through it. It was like, yes, the ending of the book makes the whole thing worth it. So Neil Stephenson written a lot of stuff, Snow Crash, Diamond Age, Van Allen Plexico show, lots of connections. Anyways, we can continue.
So, do we have any other thoughts for the general discussion, or should we move on
I feel like there's got to be more stuff to talk about. So I loved G'Kar in this. I love that he had such a journey in his view of the Narns, because at the start of the show, he is on, I cannot believe the atrocity, and basically Hitler's successor is coming to the station. You're welcoming him with fanfare. And that's not okay. And, going through his eventual acceptance and then paralleling back to his hatred of malaria. Just G'Kar in this is amazing.
Agreed. And also a lot of the subtext and also just his bits of business. He's holding on to the Book of Shaquan, essentially his.
Yes. At the end where he's like moaning and crying with it. Yes.
Yeah. And, again, like we said before, he's settling all of his affairs. He is prepared for this literally do or die assassination attempt and willing to risk it all. And isn't that interesting? Again, because we'll always compare G'Kar and Mollari's motivations and actions, but really you do see the two sides of the coin on what both men do, what both men are willing to do in the best interests of their people, and the consequences of and the fallout of what happens. It's two very different things. And just like Mollari, G'Kar is just what a journey for this character and actor throughout. I mean, that's Jurassic and Andreas, and I always forget how to say Katsoulis, or however you say his Greek name. But they're so great, and they really are just they are the spine of this TV show, and this is a very significant episode for both of them.
Oh yeah, from what I hear of the ratings in season 1, I wouldn't be surprised had they cast anyone else in those roles that could not. They could act individually, but the fact that they work so well together.
Oh yeah.
Without that dynamic, I don't know if we'd have seen a season 2. Because that first season was
point.
Touch and go.
Yeah, you're right, man. No, it was pretty rough. Absolutely. And then again, it's the strength of these actors. They're I mean, especially Mollari, again with that stupid wig. And you really, it was just, John, honestly, I give you credit for sticking with it, because it's a weird look. And it was so off-putting. But thankfully, Peter Jurasik is such a great actor, and what charisma and command that he's able to pull you in, and you really, again, you have to get through season 1, but really you love Mollari. You have to love Mollari for all of his faults.
Mm-hmm. And he still can command that. If you've seen his cameos, they're amazing.
Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, I've seen a few people sharing in the Babylon 5 fan groups where it's like, yeah, I got a cameo for my wife for her birthday. This is incredible. Watch it. And it is. And he'll be in there talking about, the glories and lamenting the past. And so he's doing it in character. He never actually mentioned the Centauri because he doesn't own the rights. But
I'm gonna have to buy a cameo from him. I'd love for Lando Mollari to rant to me. That'd be great.
So I was watching this while my girlfriend was getting ready to take a nap before going to her night job, and she has seen some of Babylon 5 before. And whenever it was the early scene between G'Kar and Sheridan, she made the comment that she does not think that Sheridan has a very commanding presence on this show. And as she said that, I was watching the scene, and he does seem very boyish. And we've talked before, whenever he first came on the show, about how Straczynski intentionally had the character presented in a certain way at the beginning so that he could go on a journey through the course of the show. And so I'm wondering if that's part of it, if that he is still in that sort of, young, gung-ho, happy captain kind of mode here that will shift as time goes on.
Yeah, he's in the kind of, the war is over, and I'm used to people following my orders because they are soldiers too, under my command.
But why wouldn't they follow my orders, even though I can smile so pretty?
I'd respectfully disagree with your girlfriend, John, because I think, first of all, Boxleitner coming in second season really was a great energetic kick in the pants. Sinclair, the way Jeffrey, and forgive me,
Michael O'Hare was the actor.
Michael O'Hare, thank you. Jeffrey Sinclair's the character. The way Michael O'Hare was playing Sinclair, a little too leaden, a little too deadpan. There was you see the energy and the emotions from Sheridan, I think, and I could just, all I could say is it made us pay attention, at least for me, in the second season. I kind of leaned in more, and I felt like he's got a lot of Shatner in him. There's a very Kirk-like emotions on your sleeve in the way that I think Sheridan is played.
I agree that I think he's more of a dynamic range with his emotions, and that Sinclair was more often super serious than not. Although even in the early episodes of the first season, Sinclair felt a bit more not happy-go-lucky, because I don't know if he could do that, but loose and upbeat than he does later in the season. But anyway, just a thought from another viewer.
Yeah. It is coming, but they're between where they are now and where these characters will be the last time we see them. Every single one will be different.
Absolutely. That's the brilliance of this show. There's real character growth and change. And no, it was a novel for television. It absolutely was. And this is happening in the 90s. You see it now in a lot of streaming shows and even network shows that there is more character development, nuance, change. But this was pretty radical for the problem of the week. Okay, and let's reset by the end of the episode so everything's fresh again next week. That was the mode of television for decades. And Babylon 5 forced you to pay attention and take note of the changes as the story progressed.
And having a TV show structured like a novel nowadays is not uncommon at all. Sadly, so few of them actually get to complete their book. But it's a lot more common to see TV shows structured that way now.
Yeah, we also have the issue now where a lot of these TV shows that are structured as novels are going season by season, and they're not planning to end. Right? Babylon 5 was one that said it's going to be 5 years. It could have been the number one rated show on TV, and JMS would have said, okay, we're in year 5. We're going to be done at the end of this season. That's another thing. I mean, with especially Netflix and the rise of DVD on TV, that two-parter is what convinced studios that, it is safe to assume that everyone's going to be watching all episodes in order. And that's when we really saw the shift, especially in the streaming services, and those commissioned for streaming. Like, look at today's Star Trek. One season is often one story.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not a fan of that story, good luck.
Yeah, buckle in, because that's all you're getting for 10 or 12-ish episodes. Yeah, it's I don't know. Again, it's one thing to do it. It's another thing to do it well. And there sadly aren't many even current examples of shows that do it well compared to the lot of shows that we get, the glut of shows in general. And the same could be said for, again, Babylon 5 making that choice. I mean, this is pre-Sopranos and everything by a couple of years. So even the cable shows that went for a long story or season-long stories and stuff, Babylon 5 was doing it very, very early.
Yeah, we mentioned before that really Babylon 5, X-Files, and Deep Space Nine, all premiering in the same year, were the ones that started those long-term arcs in prime time. And it was Babylon 5 that leaned into that the hardest.
Agreed.
And yet it also had the fewest two-parters of those 3 series. Because the other ones, that's one thing I got to give Babylon 5. We've talked about the minor variations where you can move one episode here or there, usually because, this episode changes the status quo. Every episode will change the status quo in one way or another. But if one changes it for Londo and another one changes it for G'Kar, you might be able to reverse those two.
I did read in the background of this episode that many of the big plot points were going to be spread over different shows initially before putting them all in The Coming of Shadows. And that's interesting. But yeah, like maybe they wanted to focus on each character a little bit more by spreading them out. But instead, we get this incredibly status quo erupting episode that really does change everything for pretty much everybody. Because you could obviously lump certainly Garibaldi is in on the Rangers now. Delenn has always been, or I don't know, again, having the fact that they started on Minbar with humans and Minbari, I would assume that Delenn, might have even had a key to this prior to Sheridan's message. But yeah, I mean, so, and Ivanov obviously being under Sheridan's watch, same with Zach and everybody. So yeah, the Earth relationship with the Narn and the Centauri are about to change. Obviously, the Narn Centauri war. Everyone's affected.
Oh, that was another thing I had is that on my second watching, the opening credits, the opening speech. This is the year, the dawn of the third age of mankind, the year we saw the coming of the Great War. And it's just like, okay, here we go. This is it, That great, apparently as a first-time viewer, this is the Great War starting up right here.
Yeah. No, it's the first strike. It's the Shadows making their attack. No, not everyone knows who's attacking. It's blamed on the Centauri, but this is what starts the Great Galactic War. Absolutely.
I have comments that are better saved for later episodes when you have a more complete understanding.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of, Garibaldi. I appreciate him wanting to keep Sinclair's secret, but also alerting Sheridan that, hey, something's coming. What's coming? I can't tell you. And it's like, well, wait a minute.
I'm the captain here. I should know. I need the details.
But and sadly, again, because we're talking about this 30 years later, everyone's performances, the people that are no longer with us, like G'Kar and Garibaldi and Zach and Dr. Franklin as well. Man, you just miss these guys. You really do, because they were so important to this show. And knowing that there are future Babylon 5 projects and they're not part of it, it sucks. Jerry Doyle was so great as Garibaldi. Richard Franklin was so great as Richard Biggs was so great as Dr. Franklin.
Mira Furlan as Delenn.
Oh, Mira Furlan, yeah, my God. Yeah. It sucks. It really sucks. These were brilliant actors, and really, we didn't know anybody. All we knew was Bruce Boxleitner from Scarecrow and Mrs. King, and he was fun. I say this as somebody older that watched Scarecrow and Mrs. King as much as I did Babylon 5. But yeah, we had no idea about these people, and they were so great. This cast is just amazing, and this episode, I think, represents them quite well.
Mm-hmm. They gel, and a lot of it is how they work together. I've said it before, I will say it again. I have never seen a pair that work together so magnificently on screen as Jurassic and Katsoulis. That's just the Londo and G'Kar put so much into it, and even they were concerned because there was, for the first few seasons, the only time JMS would come out of his office and stop writing and come out to watch filming was when they were being filmed. So they were worried that he wasn't happy with them, and he was there to monitor them, and they kept upping their game until finally Jurassic went to him and said, "Look, you're watching us closely. You must be concerned. What do you want?" And he said, "I'm not concerned. It's the high point of my day. I know what you're doing is going to knock it out of the park, so I want to watch that." So then they got nervous when he was so busy he didn't show.
Damned if you are, damned if you aren't. But it's a small price to pay for immortality.
Yeah, so one other thing to note, probably picked up on it at this point. It may not have been as obvious in TV resolution back then, but when Sheridan and the Emperor have their conversation alone, that's a virtual set.
Oh.
So that whole set was CGI created behind them.
Interesting.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because also for years I've heard people go, the space effects in Babylon 5, they're not that great. I always enjoyed them. I thought they certainly have, CGI has surpassed what they were able to do 30 years ago. Fine, great, and then wonderful. That's great. But I never felt short serviced by the CGI and special effects on Babylon 5. I always felt they were quite good, and even now they don't look rinky-dink to me in any way. I thought I like them. I don't know what you guys think.
There's no question that they are of the 90s.
Yeah.
But we've said it before, their budget did not allow for doing this show with models. The Gathering broke the record set by Return of the Jedi for the most starships on screen at once. They could not have done that with models. The money just wasn't there. So, yeah, you can look at it and immediately know this is CGI, this is live action. You can draw that line, so it's not as convincing as it would become, but that's what was necessary to allow them to tell the story.
And, they do good, I don't know what you call it, the cinematography, the blocking, or whatever you want to call it, of the actual animation. The fact that things like textures and lighting are not up to modern standards of making things look realistic, set that aside, the actual animation of these ships is on point. They do good scene work with their CGI. It's just the actual, like I said, textures and lighting of the shapes is the only thing that really sets it apart from 1994 and 2024.
Yeah, the fact that they were not constrained to a predetermined set of physical rails that the camera could move on means that, if the CGI was made today, then I think this would be superior to most Star Trek space battles just because of that camera motion.
Mm-hmm.
Because they weren't constrained by rails. I mean, we're recording this the week that they've announced Babylon 5 The Road Home and released that first image, and my God, the station looks great. That's all we have is one image, which is actually a screen capture, and it looks amazing.
Is it coming out this year, or is it coming out next year?
They haven't given us a release date yet, but it was originally supposed to be announced at SDCC in 2022 and made available the next day. or the same day. He's supposed to announce it, and you could buy it now.
Wow.
But then that announcement didn't happen because JMS had to miss the convention because he had COVID.
Mm.
So this is the way they're doing it now. So yeah, we don't have a release date yet, but it was supposed to be available last July, and then he shared a photo from a couple months ago of him and Boxleitner as they were recording a commentary for it. So I suspect now, okay, the commentary is recorded in March, so we might have to wait a little bit longer because it seems like, now again, this is my speculation. I think it was originally intended as a streaming-only product, and now with the delay, they figured, okay, yeah, maybe with the interest in the new series, there's enough to go physical as well.
Yeah, again, they're part of that whole Warner Brothers Discovery mess as we're recording this that the company is in, that is heavily in flux, as are most of the streamers, in fact. It's, we'll see, I guess. But yeah, it's as you were saying, Blaine, maybe you said it off the air, but it's been kind of interesting that initially HBO Max had, and it was called HBO Max still at this recording, they had Babylon 5 on there, and now it's not on there anymore, at least, again, as of this recording. I imagine when the new product is out, they'll hopefully put it back on. But yeah, I know that Straczynski and Warner's obviously have had this tug of war with the franchise in general. The attempts to make other products after Babylon 5 and Crusade. And again, I know you guys will get to those in later episodes and stuff. But yeah, it's frustrating for us Babylon 5 fans who really love this thing and want to see more.
Well, hopefully the road home will do it. I wouldn't be surprised, because again, at the time of this recording, we are in the early days of a writer's strike. They may be spreading out the product because they don't know how long the strike will last.
Very true. Very true.
Right, so shall we move on to our last best hope and talk about our standout characters or character moments?
Sure.
I'm ready for that.
I am too.
All right. So, John with an H, how about you go first as our guest?
Oh, thank you. Well, I mean, honestly, I think Turhan Bey as the focus of what's going on with the Ace story. I think he did a career standout performance as the Emperor. You had sympathy for him. You knew he was a tragic character. And he's as the catalyst of everything that, puts everything in motion and stuff. For me, it was Turhan Bey.
I loved his portrayal here. Our first introduction to the concept of him. No, wait, we see him before we hear G'Kar rant about him, right?
Right.
Okay, so yeah, we see him and he's this, sympathetic leader, and then we hear all these things that G'Kar is saying about him, and Sheridan points out, well, this guy didn't do those things, and you immediately believe it that this guy is different from his predecessors.
He's a good man, yeah.
And you believe that because of the way that the actor was portraying Turhan, in the previous scene. So yeah, I really liked that as well. My own pick is different though. I don't know if I can go next.
Go ahead.
So I said it earlier, and I'll just reiterate it here there now. Watching G'Kar go through the roller coaster on this episode, he has been one of the most interesting characters for me to watch, just because I keep on remembering that in the early episodes of season 1, he was presented and positioned as the antagonist of the series. And it does not take long for you to realize that that's not entirely true. And by the end of season 1, you're completely disenchanted of the idea. He's not the antagonist of the series. He is, he has people he's an antagonist to, but he's not the antagonist of the show. And so watching him here go from anger that the Emperor of the Centauri is coming to this station to part of an assassination plot against this heinous, seemingly, individual, to turning completely around at hearing the Emperor's message that, what? We did some really horrible stuff to you, and it's terrible. And I, as the leader of this people, am saying to you, I'm sorry. I want us to be better. And his response to that with Mollari, and then complete 180 again whenever he finds out about the attack. That man goes through the ringer in this episode, and it shows, and I love it.
Yeah, and my pick is just a segment of that journey. It's when he's heard the apology, and he's coming out, through the Zocalo going, Mollari! And Londo's running for his life because he thinks he's heard about Quadrant 14, and he's going to tear me limb from limb. And it's, I'm going to get you a drink. And just You know they've been antagonistic for so long. He comes in as antagonistic. You know he still can't resist toying with Mollari at that moment. Even pausing before he says a drink. No, I'm setting you up to be afraid because that's been our relationship, but that's not where I'm going today. I am just having fun with you today.
Yes. Yeah, that was good.
All right. So then I think we move on to giving form to the dream. So this is our segment where we usually go through and say, well, these are the pieces that you should pay attention to because they're going to be relevant in the future. So the parts of this episode that are going to be relevant to the future would be the entire runtime. This is one of those.
All the events, yeah, man. And again, the consequences of the Emperor's death, and just start the laundry list and everything. Rangers, the Narn Centauri War. Again, it's these are the and literally, as the title says, the coming of shadows.
It's interesting that we didn't actually see Morden in this episode.
Yeah, he was mentioned, but we don't get him on screen. I just think there wasn't space for him.
Yeah.
And also the budget allowed for, 4 major guest speaking parts per episode. We've got Rifa, we've got the Emperor, we've got the Prime Minister, and we've got our Ranger. So that's the 4 that were in the budget.
Yeah.
So I think that's why Mr. Morden he's a part of the story that does not appear on screen.
Yes, and isn't that interesting too? That you don't at this point. You just have, all you need is Mollari saying, he said name a target, and we know what he's talking about, obviously. So, Morden's presence is there, even though Morden himself physically wasn't there.
And I would expect that the dynamic between G'Kar and Mollari is irrevocably changed at this point. They've had their playful hostility where they're, sort of Abbott and Costelloing each other sometimes, and it's like, oh, I'll get him next time. And now it's G'Kar's eyes are dripping with hatred at the end of this. And Mollari is put off. He does not know how to react to this.
Yeah, he's embarrassed. He's been caught, and as much as he's going to bluster his way publicly through that and stuff, he knows G'Kar has his number, and he's both afraid but also embarrassed.
All right. So I think we're close to the end here. Yeah, so how people can get in touch with us in our comlink section. So one way is by email. You can send email to Babylon5 30 years later at gmail.com, your choice of letters or numerals for the numbers. We've captured all 4 of those addresses.
You can also leave comments for the show at its website. JohnReadsComics.com is one of those websites. There is no H in John this time.
So that's where all of John's podcasts are. All of mine are at Bureau42.com. You can leave your comments there.
And you can also leave a review at your podcatcher of choice. We check Apple Podcasts as a matter of course. If you leave a review somewhere else and you would like us to acknowledge on the air, we would love to do so. Just let us know that it's out there.
And then the last way to get in hold of us, all of our episodes are automatically cross-posted to YouTube with little visualizers. And you can leave comments there.
John, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you asking me. And again, this is one of my favorite series and certainly one of my favorite episodes. So thanks.
Oh, we're very happy to have you. So again, for those who don't know John, check out the Word Balloon podcast, which will have been going for close to 20 years by the time you hear this episode.
Wordballoon.com. I'm on all the podcast platforms. I also do my interviews first as videos. So I have my Word Balloon YouTube channel as well. And you can reach me directly, email john@wordballoon.com.
That's John with an H, just to clarify.
That is John with an H, thank you.
And Word Balloon has no H.
Word Balloon has no H, no. And a lot of people sometimes misspell Word Balloon because they forget there's 2 O's in balloon. So it'll be like Word Ballon. And it's like, no. Un, double O.
Yeah. Actually, one of the recent, at the time of this recording, episodes, Brian Knuckle Bendis said that Word Balloon is going to turn into an oral history that's going to be cited in people's master's theses. I think he was bang on with that.
Well, thank you. That's nice. Well, again, that's why when you're around 18 years, you manage to collect a lot of different interviews. And my inspiration was things like the Comics Journal and Amazing Heroes and David Anthony Kraft's comics interview magazines of the 80s and 90s. That was my intent with doing it in an audio capacity. And thankfully, a lot of great creators like Brian have responded and like talking to me. So it's a big help.
Yeah, well, you've gotten that response because you do it well. If listeners are looking for good places to start, if you dig through the archives to July 2019, you'll be able to find where John was talking to J. Michael Straczynski himself about becoming Superman.
His book, yes, his autobiography. And yeah, what a career, what a creator. It was a thrill and an honor to speak with him. I hope sometime in the future we could do it again, because we spent a good amount of that interview talking about Babylon 5 and things like replacing Sinclair with Sheridan and those kinds of choices that had to happen and how he adjusted his writing for those things.
Mm-hmm. And there's times reading it where the show was better for it.
I think so. I really do.
Yeah, there's some other changes coming that didn't necessarily improve the show, but
they're
Stuff
significant,
happens.
and those people become significant characters on their own.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like when Nicholas Colasanto passed away during Cheers, and they replaced him with Coach, and they replaced him with Woody Harrelson. Nobody's going to replace Coach, but Woody was great, and Woody became part of the story, and the similar things in the future of Babylon 5.
So next week, is this GROPOS or is this Gropos?
It's the Gropos.
Okay. Yeah, Latin, right?
Yeah, we've actually heard the term in Larry DeTillia, or in a previous episode recently. Larry DeTillia writes next one. It's short for ground pounders. It was the infantry in the war. It came up in the conversation. I'm trying to remember the exact episode, but it was.
I remember hearing the term before.
Yeah, Garibaldi and Dwight Schultz's character were talking about it. So we said, "Oh yeah, I figured you were a Gropo or a ground pounder." So yes.
All right, so that's next week.
Yeah, so that's what we'll be dealing with, because that originally aired on February 8th, 1995. So wow. Larry DeTillio's second last episode, though he did not know it at the time.
Every time I hear a date, I think of what I was doing in 1995, and it blows my mind that it was that long ago.
Yeah, this was the year I graduated high school.
I was in sports radio here in Chicago 5 days a week and enjoying myself in one of my favorite radio jobs in my career.
Okay. John, do you remember what you were doing in 95?
I was 2 years behind you, Blaine, so that was my sophomore year. And 1996, not so good. But 1995, yeah, sophomore year of high school, having fun, marching band.
Nice.
It was a good year.
What instrument?
Marching band, I was a bass drum, because in concert season I did the bassoon, and you can't march with a bassoon. So I was the big old drum on the end of the drum line.
I wanted to play the bassoon, and my parents were like, that's too expensive of an instrument, though.
But we borrowed one from the school. We never did buy our own.
That's great. That's great. And we had to rent them or whatever. I don't remember the particulars, but they're like, yeah, here's some drumsticks. Play the drum. I'm like, all right.
All right. Well, again, John, thank you for coming on, and for the listeners, thank you for listening.
And good eating to you.